For millennia, each night Earth was shrouded in darkness. But a century and a half ago, thanks to one man, the world changed. This man is one of the most famous scientists in history, quite logically due to his discoveries. Streets are illuminated by streetlights and light bulbs shine in apartments because of him. Thanks to him, we wash clothes and heat food by simply pressing a button. And that's not all. He developed radio and wireless control, foresaw the emergence of drones, Wi-Fi and cellular communication. Streets, units of measurement and the most famous electric car are named in his honor. But wait, this is only part of the story. In reality, it gets even more interesting. The same man swindled his business partners, was even more often swindled by them, and died in poverty. He electrocuted himself, suffered from strange phobias, dabbled in esotericism, slept for 2 hours, and most likely remained a virgin all his life. He envisioned mad projects, planned to provide the planet with free electricity, claimed to have seen spirits and communicated with Martians. Some even believe he was from another civilization. Perhaps only one person in history could embody everything I've listed. His name is Nikola Tesla. In this video, we will try to understand why Tesla first became one of the most famous scientists on the planet, why he was forgotten for half a century, and then suddenly remembered and deified in the world of science. Who was Nikola Tesla really? What did he invent? Why did the FBI confiscate his documents after his death? And why do many believe Tesla could have built paradise on our planet but wasn't allowed to? What do most people think of when they hear the word Tesla? Exactly. When we say Tesla, we think of the car. And this man, Elon Musk, is one of the richest people on the planet and also the CEO of Tesla, the most famous brand of electric cars. To the layperson, it all seems logical. Scientist Tesla had something to do with electricity. The Tesla car is electric. Elon Musk is a fan of the scientist, so he named the car in his honor. Logical, but untrue. Let's debunk a few myths right away. Elon Musk did not found Tesla. He joined it as an investor at an early stage and later became the CEO. By the time Elon Musk came along, the company was already called Tesla. Moreover, the entrepreneur is not particularly a fan of the scientist. According to interviews, he greatly admires Thomas Edison more. You will learn much about him throughout the video, including that he and Tesla were adversaries. Furthermore, many are convinced of the following. Edison is mainly to blame for Tesla dying in poverty and being unable to complete experiments that could have drastically changed life on our planet. The experiments in question may be the most interesting aspect of this story. The experiments are associated with mysticism, electric current, alien intelligence, energy, vibrations, and other things surprising for a serious scientist. After Tesla's death, many documents related to his experimental results were seized by the FBI. Why? A good question. Since then, Tesla has become the hero of a vast number of conspiracy theories and one of the most famous scientists in history. His face adorns t-shirts and memes. Yet few know of his contributions and the discoveries he made. Today, many of you will join that select group. To begin, let us rewind history a century and a half. The young Nikola Tesla spends several years working in the European branch of Thomas Edison's electric company in Paris, manufacturing light bulbs, constructing power plants and street lighting. At the time, the industry was no less trendy and promising than IT is today. Tesla is an ordinary engineer, unlikely to build a fruitful corporate career, not due to a lack of talent, but rather an excess of it. Nikola plans to change the world. Borrowing money from relatives, he boards a steamship and crosses the Atlantic. The year is 1884. The 28-year-old Serb does not choose the States by chance. His idol, Thomas Edison, lives and works there. To the vast majority today, Edison is known as the inventor of the light bulb, and that is unfortunate. Firstly, because the light bulb was invented before him, and secondly, Edison is an incredibly remarkable large-scale character. To find the closest modern analogy, he would be Elon Musk times 10. In the mid-1880s, Thomas Edison not only symbolizes progress, but in some sense he is progress itself. He is not yet 40, and his company has already produced the first ever sound recording device called the phonograph and the incandescent lamp, which could burn much longer than the rival's inventions. Edison stands on the brink of illuminating the homes of New York City residents and eventually the entire planet in a way that is familiar to any modern person with an electric light bulb. The press hails Edison as a wizard, and an immense number of talented dreamers from around the world wish to work in his laboratory. Among them is Nikola Tesla. Our hero is certain that Edison is the only person in the world capable of understanding him. Tesla's ideas are revolutionary. Chief among them is alternating current. In the mid-80s, this is a poorly understood concept. Potentially, it could change the lives of people on the planet, and spoiler, it will. But at the time when Nikola Tesla arrives in America, few believe in the prospects of alternating current, including Thomas Edison. He advocates for the so-called direct current. Yes, I understand many of you have questions arising. Firstly, why was Tesla's biography primarily about Edison? Secondly, what's with the Martians, virginity, and mysticism? And thirdly, direct current, alternating current, what is all this? It's hard to believe, but all the things I've listed are interconnected, so don't worry. All will be revealed, and we will start precisely with the question of current. The ideas of Edison and Tesla in this field contradicted each other to such an extent that their disagreements would go down in history under the name War of Currents. In the process of this conflict, many animals and people would be killed, and Tesla and his idol Edison, one might say, would become enemies. As a result of this conflict, life on the planet Earth would change forever. So, the War of Currents. In the history of Nikola Tesla, this is perhaps the most important stage, for after this, his name would be forever inscribed in the history of science. The confrontation begins at the end of the 1870s. At that time, Nikola Tesla, a descendant of a Serbian Orthodox priest, studied at a prestigious university in Austria, and he studied excellently. His main interests were physics, engineering, and oddly enough, languages. He studied nearly a dozen foreign languages, read foreign authors such as Shakespeare, Goethe, or Voltaire, and once he started reading a certain author, he couldn't stop at just one or two works. He had to finish them all. This is an interesting trait, which today is more often diagnosed as OCD or obsessive-compulsive disorder. Unexpected fears, phobias, and Tesla's obsession with certain things, chief among them his inventions and theories. The primary focus of student Tesla was electricity, a phenomenon that fascinated him since childhood. In one of the classes, a physics professor brought a device that operated on direct current. But for it to work, a commutator was needed, a contraption that converted alternating current into direct current. Without a commutator, the device wouldn't work. Tesla intuitively began to object to the teacher. The commutator, he said, was unnecessary. The device should work without it on alternating current, and besides, the motor would work better, without friction and breakdowns. The teacher immediately demonstrated the student's error to all those present. The professor likely did not suspect that the young man had OCD, and that he would spend the next few years trying to prove his point of view. And now is the very moment when we need to talk a little about physics, and particularly about current. Without this, it is impossible to understand who Tesla was. The reasons for his conflicts with Edison and almost everything I will talk about today is tied to this. I promise it will be brief and as accessible as possible. Here we go. We have a small motor that needs to rotate. For this, it needs current. A battery can serve as the source. Thus, an elementary electrical circuit is obtained. Electrons flow from the battery towards the motor and it rotates. The crucial detail is that the electrons move uniformly in one direction. This is direct current. On a graph, it looks like this. It can be compared to a smooth flow of water through a pipe in one direction. Alternating current is an entirely different matter. In this case, we need to power a light bulb. We also have an electrical circuit, but instead of a weak battery, there will be a switch on the wall. Pressing it causes current to flow to the bulb. However, in this case, the current is no longer direct but alternating. That is, electrons do not move uniformly in one direction but constantly and very rapidly change direction back and forth. On a graph, such movement appears as a wave. At the peak points of the movement, both top and bottom, the bulb glows brighter. Thus, the light in our apartment constantly flickers. But this happens very quickly, 50, 60 times per second. The eye is physically unable to notice this, creating the illusion that the bulbs glow steadily. What relevance does this have to the topic, you might ask? For that, we must return to the late 70s of the 19th century. At that time, while Nikola Tesla was studying at the Austrian Polytechnic, his idol Edison was gradually changing the world. He had already invented the phonograph, a device that records sound. For the first time in history, a person could record and play back their own voice. An incredible event. But ahead lay an even grander project for Edison, electric lighting. By then, people had already learned to illuminate rooms and streets in various ways. In homes, gas lamps were predominantly used. However, they were inconvenient, unsafe, and poorly smelled. The concept of the well-known incandescent lamp already existed. Many inventors struggled to ensure the lamp could burn long enough and be safe. The first to achieve this was indeed Edison. In his laboratory, they made a bulb with a carbon filament. It could glow for up to 1,000 hours, but the main thing was not even that. You could make 1, 2, 3,000 great bulbs. The question was how these bulbs would receive current. It was necessary to devise the entire system: generators, wires, insulation, and a bunch of other things. In the early 80s of the 19th century, Edison's company began electrifying a small district in Manhattan, New York. The entrepreneur's plans were grandiose: millions of bulbs and hundreds of thousands of illuminated homes. But there were several obstacles right away, the main one being this. Thomas Edison was a proponent of direct current, the kind that flows evenly in one direction. However, the drawback of such a system is that a large amount of current needs to be sent through the wires to power the bulbs, requiring very thick wires, which in turn entails high costs. Moreover, direct current passing through wires begins to weaken. Because of this, Edison had to install generators practically in every courtyard. Only in this way was it possible to maintain the necessary amount of current in the wires. This, in turn, caused discontent among residents because the generators were large and noisy, and the entire system was hardly applicable anywhere except in large, densely populated cities. Electric lighting thus looked cool and impressive, but if you weren't a wealthy city resident, it wasn't available to you, in every sense of the word. At the same time, a young clerk from Europe, Nikola Tesla, already knew how to solve the problem. After that humiliating incident at a university lecture, Tesla spent many years solving the problem of utilizing alternating current. The fact is, by nature, electric current is indeed alternating, and it is far more efficient for lighting homes and streets. You don't need thick wires for powerful flow, and generators can be located hundreds of kilometers from the homes or factories that need to be powered. And in the early 1880s, having spent hundreds of thousands of hours in thinking and calculations, Tesla, during a walk in the park, drew on the ground a diagram of a motor operating on alternating current. After that, he would work for a couple more years at Edison's company in Paris and then go to New York. One might think that upon arriving in the States, Tesla would meet Edison, hear his brilliant ideas, and immediately begin to implement them, not forgetting to duly reward the young engineer. But, as you already understand, everything turned out quite differently. Initially, the promising Serb was hired to work in Edison's laboratory, where Tesla repaired direct current generators. As the inventor himself later recalled, he worked tirelessly from 10 in the morning until 5 the next morning for meager pay. At the same time, he tried to attract attention and convey to Edison the idea of an alternating current motor. Why Tesla ultimately failed to achieve this is not entirely clear. There's a story about how either Edison himself or one of his managers offered Tesla $50,000 to make the design of the direct current generator more efficient. $50,000 in those days was an enormous sum, over $1 million in today's terms, a handsome reward. Tesla accomplished the task. When he demanded the money he had earned, Edison supposedly laughed and said it was a joke, and the young Serb simply didn't understand American humor. Whether this situation actually occurred is unknown. No genuine contract for $50,000 has been discovered to this day. On the other hand, Edison was known at times to make loud and obviously unachievable promises. What we know for certain is that 6 months later, Tesla resigned. He had no prospects of advancing his alternating current ideas at Edison's company. And there could have been several reasons for this. Firstly, Edison was likely genuinely concerned about the dangers of alternating current, which indeed poses greater risks to humans compared to direct current. Secondly, Edison's entire system was already tied to direct current. And thirdly, Thomas perhaps did not fully understand what alternating current was. The fact is, Edison did not have a formal education. And I mean, not higher education, but just schooling. He is a bright example of the American dream. A self-made man through hard work, immense curiosity, and a steadfast, often unpleasant character. Edison is credited with the famous phrase, "My plan didn't fail, I just found 1,000 ways that don't work." The method of constant trial and error was the essence of his work. To understand the principles of alternating current, one had to be a completely different person, like Tesla. Compared to Edison, he had an excellent education. Yes, technically he never graduated from the university in Austria. Nikola simply did not take the final exams because he was experiencing problems with gambling and alcohol at that time. But before that, he studied excellently. According to Tesla himself, Edison could have saved 90% of his time if he carried out sufficient calculations before starting to try something. But perhaps the most important difference between Edison and Tesla was the following. The former considered sales as the main criterion of success. Innovations for the sake of innovations did not interest him. The latter did not think of his inventions as a product at all. Despite the lack of business talent, Nikola Tesla leaves Edison and starts his own company. The engineer receives his first patents for several of his developments in the field of alternating current, generators, transformers, and motors. Tesla quickly meets business partners. For them, he works on improving the design of arc lamps and other inventions. Upon receiving his first money, the scientist immediately moves to a good apartment in Manhattan. However, the cooperation does not last long. Tesla's partners show no interest in alternating current. Moreover, they swiftly squeeze him out of the company, keeping for themselves the rights to the engineer's developments during the period of collaboration. Left without money and business, Tesla went to dig trenches for laying cables in Edison's company. For the talented engineer, this was a difficult period. At times he lacked money for food, and wielding a shovel was not the dream job for a scientist with a good education and knowledge of several languages. Fortunately, at that point in history, Tesla was not the only person who understood the potential of alternating current. He meets a couple of businessmen who are ready to find money in exchange for 50% of the rights to Tesla's patents in the field of alternating current. If it all works out, this could potentially bring millions of dollars. The engineer's new company comes to the attention of George Westinghouse. George is a very wealthy man. He made his fortune thanks to the design of train brakes at a time when railroads were developing by leaps and bounds. Westinghouse understands that electricity is the next big thing, and the winner in the race will gain incredible wealth. However, Westinghouse is neither a scientist nor a clairvoyant. He does not know exactly which current will ultimately prevail and achieve mass adoption. Therefore, the entrepreneur simultaneously invests in direct current developments as well as alternating. It will take several more years before Tesla and his partners manage to convince Westinghouse that the future lies with alternating current. Then the businessman offers Tesla hundreds of thousands of dollars for the patent rights and, most importantly, royalties. $2.50 for every horsepower generated using Tesla's developments. Not only can the end of 19th century sums I mention easily be multiplied by 30 to understand their present-day value, but also the royalties were potentially supposed to make Tesla a multi-millionaire, since electricity would be needed by all. Thus, Westinghouse fully aligned himself with alternating current, meaning that the war with Edison entered a heated phase. Nikola Tesla temporarily moved to work in Westinghouse's laboratory in the city of Pittsburgh. At the same time, Edison did not intend to back down. He initiated a true black marketing machine. The main task was to prove to everyone that alternating current is deadly. As I mentioned earlier, Edison's statements contained a grain of reason. However, firstly, the danger of many things does not prevent us from using them: fire, gas, and others. Secondly, the methods Edison used for public confrontation were, to put it bluntly, extreme. To demonstrate to the public the danger of alternating current, Edison electrocuted numerous animals, ranging from dogs and pigs to an elephant. Some of these experiments he even captured on a camera prototype that was also being developed by Edison. Is it necessary to say the animals died? I think not. Another direction of the PR campaign was the electric chair. Edison tried to convince the authorities to use the new execution mechanism, which, as it turns out, operated on alternating current. Allegedly, it was so dangerous that it quickly took a person's life. However, saying is easier than doing. Engineers working on the design quickly encountered unexpected questions. What should the voltage be, how long, and so on. In 1890, the first execution using this method took place. Everything, of course, did not go according to plan. The event took several minutes. The criminal went through incredible agony but was still alive. They had to increase the voltage to finish the matter. The poor soul's body began to practically spark. Partially, Edison's plan worked. Westinghouse, although trying to distance himself as much as possible from what was happening, had his business not in the best state at that time. Besides the tarnished reputation of alternating current, there were also significant expenses on development and a heap of lawsuits, including those who claimed they were the first to create the inventions patented by Tesla. Later, the court recognized the scientists' full rights to the motor and other developments in the field of alternating current, but the legal battles dragged on for years. Westinghouse reportedly asked the engineer to forego the very royalties of $2.50 per horsepower, so that development could continue, Tesla supposedly agreed. And if that was indeed the case, it was Tesla's main financial mistake in his career. He could at least have discussed a slightly smaller percentage. Thanks to the royalties, the engineer would not only have become a wealthy man and not died in poverty, but more importantly, he would have been able to continue his ambitious projects, which could have changed the world. However, Tesla simply lacked the funds. On the other hand, the agreement between Westinghouse and Tesla has never been found, meaning it is unclear whether it was signed at all. Furthermore, credit must be given to Westinghouse, who indeed believed in Tesla, although the prospects were not obvious. In the year 1893, two significant events occur in the life of our hero and his developments in the field of alternating current. At the International Fair in Chicago, entrepreneurs showcase their technical achievements. Westinghouse's company wins the rights to illuminate the pavilion using their alternating current system. A dozen generators, designed by Tesla, produce more electricity than the entire city of Chicago at that time. The fair is brilliantly illuminated, to the absolute astonishment of all those present. 6 months later, Tesla and Westinghouse's company received the right to build an alternating current generator system at Niagara Falls. The powerful flows of water generate energy which powers the generators that produce electricity. So much is generated that it could illuminate nearly the entire northeastern part of the United States. For Tesla, this is a double success. Firstly, alternating current ultimately triumphed over direct current, and secondly, the construction of the generator system at Niagara Falls is a significant step forward on the path that Nikola Tesla would walk all his life, namely the use of nature's power for the benefit of humanity. To be precise, The victory over Edison and direct current had been achieved several years before the fair in Chicago and the generators at Niagara Falls. At that time, most companies recognized the advantage of alternating current, including Edison's company General Electric, which he was forced to leave, thus acknowledging his defeat. Since then, alternating current has changed life on the planet, and every time we turn on a light or plug in an electric device, wherever we are on the globe, we are using the achievements of Nikola Tesla. Speaking of sockets and electrical devices, an interesting fact: many electrical devices in our homes continue to operate on direct current. You have probably noticed such a box on the cord of a laptop charger or other devices. Its task is precisely to convert the alternating current from the socket into direct current. But let's return to the 19th century. Back in the 90s, Tesla becomes a celebrity. He receives American citizenship, and even despite waiving the royalties in favor of Westinghouse, the inventor is a very wealthy man. He is not even 40. He mingles among the upper echelons of New York's elite. He lives in a luxurious hotel, frequents the best restaurants, and is always elegantly dressed, which is evident from the few photographs. Tesla is a fascinating conversationalist, speaks multiple languages, knows many poets and writers by heart, and is ready to discuss any topic. And here it is logical to assume that Tesla's personal life is also vibrant. But that is far from the truth. On one hand, he is popular among high society ladies, both single and married. They write him letters, invite him to dinners. Yet Tesla himself, judging by all accounts, is completely indifferent to this. There were sparse rumors about the scientist's homosexuality, but today the predominant viewpoint is that Tesla was heterosexual, who completely renounced sexual activity, and it is not certain that he ever had such an experience. One of the reasons could have been the desire to dedicate himself entirely to work and science. In Memories, Tesla once admitted that women could be a significant distraction from the thought process. On the other hand, the inventor had so many different phobias that it was difficult to be in close relationships with another person. Tesla suffered from germophobia, meaning he was very afraid of microbes and having them on his hands. He also could not stand touching another person's hair or women's jewelry. Moreover, Tesla was obsessed with the number 3, and everything in his life had to be a multiple of this number. He, for instance, walked around buildings 3 times before entering and chose hotel rooms divisible by 3, and so forth. And after such facts about Tesla, one involuntarily recalls Freud, and there's a desire to learn more about his childhood. Tesla's childhood, of course, not Freud's. The year 1856. During a summer thunderstorm in the small village of Smiljan, Nikola Tesla was born. At that time, his home was located within the Austrian Empire. Today, it is Croatia. Nikola would become the 4th of 5 children in the family, 3 girls and 2 boys. To some extent, Tesla was fortunate with his genes. His father was a Serbian Orthodox priest with a good education, and his uncle was a professor of mathematics. Although his mother was a homemaker by Tesla's accounts, she possessed good engineering talents. She managed their farm and devised various household devices, from a churn to weaving implements. At 5 years old, Nikola's older brother died after falling from a horse. Most likely, this event significantly impacted the character of the future scientist. He began to avoid communication both with peers and with his parents. By adolescence, Tesla had developed most of those very peculiar phobias: fear of women's jewelry, fear of touching hair, and, for example, he was frightened by the sight of peaches. The only thing that allowed the teenager to socialize was science. It was through this interest that he mainly interacted with people. After school, Nikola was supposed to follow in his father's footsteps and become a clergyman, but misfortune helped. Tesla became seriously ill during a cholera epidemic. Nikola spent almost a year in bed, and by Tesla's own recollections, he told his father that he would recover quickly if he were allowed to enroll in a technical university. The father agreed and made the right decision. A priest from Tesla would have been unremarkable because, as the engineer himself said, "I love not people, but humanity." Nikola Tesla enrolled in the Austrian Polytechnic University, then the University of Prague. He excelled in his studies, but never completed either. After several years of working as an ordinary engineer, first in a telephone company and then in an electrical company, he moved to New York. You already know the subsequent story of the Serbian young engineer's rise to greatness. To some extent, this is where the discussion could even end, because I have already covered Tesla's main achievements that led him into the annals of science, all related to that very alternating current. But ironically, the most interesting part of the inventor's life starts afterwards, with interactions with Martians, esotericism, secrets and mysticism. In the mid-1890s, Nikola Tesla was a star of New York's high society. Yes, with his quirks, but that only added to his popularity. The social gatherings pleased the inventor for two reasons. Firstly, he was a lover of the high life, fine dining and luxurious hotels. Secondly, these gatherings gave him the chance to build professional connections. Among New York's elites, one could meet not only the famous writer Mark Twain, but also the wealthiest people in the country and the world. For instance, John Jacob Astor or John Morgan, who could invest in Tesla's new developments, and the inventor had much to present. In several of his public lectures, he demonstrated incredible things. He passed electric current through his body and made lamps glow without any wires, simply by holding them in his hands. To an ordinary person from the late 19th century, even someone turning water into wine would seem less impressive. It is clear that, like any trick, Tesla's demonstrations had logical explanations. But while magic tricks could hardly change life on Earth, Tesla's performances could, and did. Three aspects of this demonstration are particularly interesting. The first is the so-called Tesla coil, or transformer. This device could produce extremely high electrical voltages. It was visually spectacular. Hence, similar devices can still be found in various science museums. The second noteworthy point is the wireless glowing lamps. We have just spent considerable time discussing how the greatest minds of the world attempted to solve the problem of delivering current through wires to ordinary incandescent lamps. And here, Tesla showcases lamps glowing without wires, simply by holding them in his hands. How? The secret is as follows. You have all seen fluorescent lamps, also known as gas discharge lamps. Unlike incandescent lamps, they contain gas inside that begins to glow when exposed to current. Indeed, Tesla held an early version of the fluorescent lamp in his hands. For electricity to affect the gas inside, the lamp does not need to be connected to wires. A nearby source of electric current is required, such as a Tesla coil. And the final intriguing point in the inventor's performances was the current passing through his body. Why wasn't Tesla killed by this very electricity? We were just recently discussing electric chairs. Here, Tesla was performing a trick he conceived through his own reflections. If the electric charge is of high frequency but low power, it would be enough to power the lamps in his hands, yet a person would remain alive. However, this does not mean the event was pleasant. Tesla himself described the pain and burns he occasionally received from such demonstrations. The inventor referred to such lamps as cold light, in contrast to the warm light of incandescent lamps. You have surely noticed that fluorescent lamps have a different shade of light. Thanks to cold light, the inventor caught the attention of millionaire John Jacob Astor. Tesla conveyed a simple idea to him. With the development of electricity, people need light bulbs, millions of light bulbs, and his idea was much more profitable and economical than incandescent bulbs. Astor believed in the inventor and gave him a large sum for those times, $100,000. Such money was needed by Tesla to build a new large laboratory. But in reality, the investments in the laboratory were not meant for working on light bulbs. The scientist was not interested in profit. As always, he was concerned with humanity. Tesla's idea was the following. Light, electricity, sound, image, all are forms of energy. In other words, theoretically, all of it should be transmitted through space wirelessly. This truly intrigued the inventor. For this purpose, in 1899, he left the luxurious hotels and restaurants of New York to head to the American wilderness known as Colorado Springs. Most of you, before watching this video, have likely seen a couple of photographs of the main character, his portrait, and this shot from the laboratory at Colorado Springs. In it, a massive Tesla coil, thousands if not millions of volts of electricity, and the scientist himself calmly reading a book. However, this is essentially a photomontage. It is two images combined into one. First, the inventor was photographed in the laboratory, and then the transformer operating without him. Otherwise, Tesla would have simply been electrocuted. Meanwhile, the primary goal for which the vast laboratory in Colorado Springs was built remains intriguing. Tesla planned to transmit electricity wirelessly worldwide and entirely free of charge, or at least almost free of charge. But is this possible? You have probably heard of a physicist with the last name Hertz. At the end of the 19th century, he proved the existence of electromagnetic wave. Hertz discovered that you can create an electrical signal in one place and transmit it to another without any wires, provided both the transmitter and receiver are tuned to the same frequency. Today, both radio and television operate on this principle. Why not do the same with electricity, so thought Tesla. At the time, the renowned inventor arrives in the small town of Colorado Springs in the middle of the country, and he almost tells no one the reason for his visit. In addition to experiments with wireless electricity transmission, Tesla's plans included Martians. But let's take it step by step. A large laboratory was built with equipment capable of generating millions of volts of electricity. Tesla hangs a huge sign on the fence that translates to "Keep out, it will kill." During one of the experiments, the voltage is so high that at some point, the entire town of Colorado Springs is plunged into darkness. Tesla spends almost a year on experiments and even claims that he has achieved results, that he's on the way to making electricity freely available around the world, without wires and payment. However, no real evidence of this was ever provided. That is, yes, theoretically it seems possible to light a bulb located far enough from you if you send a sufficiently strong charge of current there using the same Tesla coil. But the ideal picture that Tesla envisioned in his head, where electricity is everywhere, free and wireless, where electrical devices do not even need to be plugged into sockets, and electric machines travel down roads without any charging autonomously, all this is impossible. As an example, consider cellular communication. We have long been using phones that have no wires. Cellular signals cross distances and obstacles without any issues. Tesla roughly saw electricity's existence in a similar way. However, the energy required to transmit a cellular signal is negligible, and therefore cellular signals do not harm us, although there are people who believe otherwise. Yet imagining vast amounts of energy necessary for lighting a bulb or operating appliances, passing not only through walls but also through our bodies, is impossible. That's why we use wires, why they are laid underground or strung on high poles, why there is insulation, and so on. Moreover, even if we set aside safety considerations, it is unlikely that electricity could be sent over very long distances without wires, as it would quickly begin to lose power. Despite all this, there are still people who are convinced of the following. The reason we don't have the free electricity Tesla envisioned is due to those damned capitalists. For over 100 years they have wanted to extract money from us, and every month we pay for what should essentially be free. In defense of this theory, it is worth mentioning that apparently some influential American businessmen connected with electricity at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, were aware of Tesla's theory and seemingly even expressed concern about it. But it did not go beyond that. Tesla's main adversaries in this case were not capitalists, but the laws of physics and his overly ambitious theories. The unsuccessful experiments in Colorado Springs have negatively impacted Tesla's reputation. Not only because he failed to prove his theories, nor solely because he deceived an investor and spent funds on other research, but also because he allegedly connected with Martians. Tesla earnestly claims that his equipment in Colorado Springs received a signal from Mars. Naturally, the newspapers cover this event. One of the world's foremost scientists declares that he's communicating with extraterrestrials. What those signals truly were is still not entirely known. But one thing is certain, they were not from aliens. Perhaps these are signals that today are captured by radio telescopes. In other words, signals from stars or from the sun, but not from little green men. It's possible Tesla recorded a radio signal from Earth itself, which he interpreted as a message from another planet. The fact is, during that period, the development of radio was in full swing, and most interestingly, if Nikola Tesla had possessed any business acumen, he might also have gone down in history as the inventor of radio. Here's how it was. While our hero was conducting controversial experiments in Colorado Springs, the Italian scientist-inventor Marconi transmitted the first radio message across the English Channel. Some of the technologies Marconi used for this belonged to Tesla. The scientist began experimenting with radio signal transmission right after his first definitive victory with alternating current. After Hertz discovered radio waves, many inventors worldwide began moving towards what we today call radio. In his work, Nikola Tesla created the first ever remote-controlled device. It was a small boat that could be maneuvered from a distance. The inventor called it the teleautomaton. For the teleautomaton's successful operation, Tesla developed several basic technologies that would later form the foundation of radio. Had our hero focused on this technology at the time, he might have become famous in history as the inventor of radio. According to one version, his research was interrupted by a fire in his New York laboratory. This same version suggests that the fire was orchestrated by his longtime rival Edison, but most likely the fire wasn't the issue. The main obstacle to success was Tesla himself and his ambitions. Beyond the teleautomaton, he envisioned a great future, a technology that would put an end to all wars on Earth. Allegedly, robots would fight instead of humans, and eventually they would become so destructive that politicians would realize the futility of war, much like nuclear weapons. Concurrently, Tesla was planning wireless power transmission, and the wireless transmission of sound and messages was just a part of his grand scheme. The year is 1900. Tesla is in the midst of his 40s. He is in a difficult situation. Despite the failure in Colorado Springs, he remains obsessed with his grand idea of wireless power transmission. However, finding investors is not easy. After failed experiments, loud press statements ending in nothing, and sensational stories about Martians, Tesla gradually acquires a reputation as a mad scientist. Conveying to investors the global ideas of transmitting everything, from electricity to sound and images, wirelessly is challenging. They think in terms of tangible products that can be sold. And such successful products after the alternating current system were never again achieved by Tesla. Perhaps the inventor himself realizes this fact, which is why he tries to pull off his old trick with an investor. To ask for money for a comprehensible but promising invention, and under the guise of this, continue his explorations in the field of wireless communication. Tesla manages to negotiate with a well-known banker of those times, Morgan. He allocates $150,000 for the development of a wireless transmission system for messages, simply a telegraph. The businessman immediately warns the scientist that this is the final amount. He will provide no more. Tesla knows that this is insufficient for his global idea, but he hopes that once the investor sees the initial results, he will gladly contribute more funds. The inventor purchases land near New York and constructs a new large laboratory there, Wardenclyffe Tower. An architect is specially hired for the project design, so the laboratory appears very futuristic. At night, the tower is brightly illuminated by powerful electrical discharges. Tesla attempts once again to prove that the main idea of his life works. However, all is in vain. At the same time, Marconi sends a successful radio signal across the Atlantic. Several years later, he obtains a patent in the United States for his technology, despite having used patented developments of Tesla. The engineer himself, who had previously looked condescendingly at all of Marconi's tests, this time calls him a microbe. Several years later, the Italian physicist will receive the Nobel Prize for his developments in radio technology, and only half a century later, after Tesla's death, the court will recognize his rights to many technologies used by Marconi. Thus, Tesla can rightfully be considered one of the inventors of radio. Having exhausted the funds for the Wardenclyffe laboratory, Tesla turns to Morgan for a new round of investments. The scientist discloses his plan for global wireless communication to the banker. But Morgan decides to invest in Marconi's invention, which at that time was showing results. To some extent, even Tesla himself begins to understand that his idea might be a fallacy. He fails to find new investors. This is when the gigantic royalties from the development of alternating current could have been useful to the engineer, but he had refused them. Though, even if they had existed, Tesla would most likely have invested every last bit into his hopeless idea. In the second half of his life, Tesla, in the eyes of many, becomes not a mad scientist, but rather just mad. It is not the first time he turns to esotericism. Tesla had long been attracted to certain religious Eastern ideas about the soul, vibrations, and energy. There is a version that this was indeed the reason for his vow of celibacy. He talked about how he once communicated with the spirit of his deceased mother. Tesla allowed for the possibilities of telepathy and put forward a theory about a device for photographing thoughts. If we add to this all the stories about Martians, it begins to feel as though we are simply talking about a city madman. But here, context is necessary for objectivity. Yes, Tesla apparently suffered serious mental health issues, especially towards the end of his life. However, many of the strange ideas he expressed were quite popular among the higher educated circles of society at that time. For example, life on Mars was seriously discussed by many. And it's hard to blame people for thinking that we are not alone in the universe. After all this happened more than half a century before space exploration. Telepathy was also quite a fashionable theory, born from the scientific discovery of Hertz. If you can transmit a radio signal by tuning a transmitter and receiver to the same frequency, then why can't the same be done with people and their thoughts? Yes, today it is clear that this is impossible, but we are talking about events of the late 19th century. There were also rumors that Tesla was the cause of the Tunguska meteorite's fall in the year 1908. More precisely, the essence of the theory is that there was no meteorite at all, and the big explosion in the Siberian taiga occurred because of Tesla's experiments with the Wardenclyffe Tower. However, the inventor completed his experiments several years earlier, so he was unlikely to have been the cause of the Tunguska incident. And if we take a closer look at Tesla's famous investors and their fates, we discover an interesting detail. John Jacob Astor will die in 1912 in the Titanic disaster. Morgan was supposed to sail on the Titanic, but changed his mind at the last moment. Coincidence? Yes, it's just a coincidence. Okay, if we distract from conspiracy theories and mysticism, what occurs with Tesla is gradually becoming typical of an aging scientist. New scientific theories begin to emerge that somewhat contradict his views, and the aging scientist perceives them negatively. This is roughly what happens with Tesla and the rising star Albert Einstein in the decades of the 1910s to 1920s. Tesla feels that Einstein's ideas lead science in the wrong direction. But by then, Tesla is 60 years old and his opinion is largely irrelevant to scientific circles. He has long disappeared from the radar of current knowledge. Having long spent the capital from developments in the field of alternating current, Nikola Tesla lives off credit. He is poor and moves from one insignificant hotel to another. The maids complain about dirt, feathers, and a large amount of bird droppings in the scientist's room. Pigeons become Tesla's main circle of acquaintances. He feeds them in the park. He brings sick birds home to nurse them. In his diary, he describes a female pigeon he loves just as a man loves a woman, and that after her death he lost the meaning of life. Tesla writes letters to Mark Twain, and everything would be fine, except that by that time the writer had been dead for many years. Sometimes Tesla is remembered and invited to events. On his 75th birthday, his photograph is placed on the cover of Time magazine, with a congratulatory message written by the world's leading scientists in his honor. However, Tesla spends most of his time in solitude. Thus, he dies in his hotel room at the age of 86. After his death, many of Tesla's documents were seized by the FBI. There were many rumors regarding this. There were speculations that Tesla was developing some kind of secret weapon, namely a supergun that operated through radiation. And such a project did indeed exist, but it was more akin to the realm of sci-fi films. The reason for the FBI's interest was rather prosaic. Tesla's nephew was the ambassador of Yugoslavia to the USA and sympathized with the communists. Therefore, the Americans feared that some possibly important documents might fall into the hands of the ideological enemy. After Tesla's death, he was forgotten and only remembered with the wave of interest in Elon Musk's company. At least that is how it appears to those far from science. The enormous hype surrounding the scientist today is directly related to the popularity of the car, which incidentally uses an alternating current motor, the original version of which was created by Tesla himself. However, within the scientific community, no one ever forgot about Nikola Tesla. His discoveries related to alternating current and his developments in radio have influenced the history of science and human civilization. A unit of measurement in physics is named after him, an honor bestowed only upon the greatest scientists. Many decades later, various ideas of Tesla nonetheless came to fruition. We are indeed transmitting information, images, and music wirelessly in mere seconds to any point on the planet. We, to some extent, live in a world that once existed only in the imagination of one man, Nikola Tesla.